The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight when Marcus Cole stepped out of the VA hospital in downtown Chicago. The grey November sky hung low over the city, and the wind carried the sharp bite of an approaching winter. He pulled his worn army jacket tighter around his shoulders and started walking toward the bus stop, his left leg aching with each step, a permanent reminder of the IED that had ended his military career 18 months ago. Marcus was 42 years old, with deep lines etched around his eyes and a close-cropped beard that was starting to show streaks of grey. His hands were calloused, his shoulders broad, and there was something in his gaze that made most people look away, not from fear, but from the weight of what they saw there. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before coming home to a country that didn't quite know what to do with him. The bus stop was empty, except for a row of plastic seats and a flickering advertisement for a law firm promising to fight for injured workers. Marcus sat down heavily, wincing as his knee protested the movement. The physical therapist at the VA had told him he was making progress, but some days it didn't feel like it. Some days it felt like he was still crawling through the dust of Kandahar, searching for pieces of himself he'd left behind. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. 4:17 in the afternoon. His apartment was a 40-minute bus ride away, a small one-bedroom in a building that had seen better days, in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. It wasn't much, but it was his. After years of barracks and tents and sleeping in armored vehicles, having his own space meant something, even if that space was lonely. The rain intensified, drumming against the plastic shelter above him. Marcus watched the street, the cars splashing through puddles, the pedestrians hurrying past with umbrellas and hoods pulled low. Everyone was going somewhere. Everyone had somewhere to be. He was about to look back down at his phone when he noticed something, a flash of movement behind a dumpster in the alley across the street. He straightened, his training kicking in automatically. For a moment, there was nothing. Then he saw it again. A small figure pressed against the brick wall, trying to stay out of sight. It was a kid. Marcus stood up, ignoring the protest in his knee, and stepped out from under the shelter. The rain immediately soaked through his jacket, but he barely noticed. He crossed the street, his eyes fixed on the alley, moving slowly so he wouldn't startle whoever was hiding there. The alley smelled like garbage and wet concrete. The dumpster was rusted and overflowing with trash bags. And behind it, wedged into the narrow space between the metal container and the wall, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. His clothes were soaked through, a thin hoodie that might have been blue once, jeans with holes in the knees, sneakers that were coming apart at the soles. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and he was shivering so hard his teeth were chattering. But what struck Marcus most were his eyes, large, brown, and filled with a fear that was far too old for his face. "Hey," Marcus said softly, crouching down to the boy's level despite the pain that shot through his leg. "You okay, buddy?" The boy pressed himself further back against the wall, his whole body tense like a cornered animal. He didn't say anything, but his eyes darted to the mouth of the alley, as if calculating escape routes. Marcus held up his hands, showing the boy he wasn't a threat. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just saw you hiding here in the rain, and I wanted to make sure you were all right. Are you lost? Are you looking for someone?" Still nothing. The boy just stared at him, shivering. "My name's Marcus," he continued, keeping his voice low and steady. "I used to be a soldier. Now I'm just a guy waiting for the bus. What's your name?" For a long moment the boy didn't respond. Then, almost too quietly to hear over the rain, he whispered, "Elijah. Elijah. That's a good name." Marcus shifted his weight, trying to take some pressure off his bad knee. "Elijah, where are your parents? Do you need help finding them?" The boy's face changed at the mention of parents, a flicker of something that Marcus recognized all too well: pain, loss, the kind of wound that doesn't show on the surface but runs deeper than any shrapnel. "I don't have parents," Elijah said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not anymore." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He'd seen a lot of things in his years of service, things that still woke him up at 3 in the morning, covered in sweat and reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. But there was something about a child, alone and afraid, that cut through all of his defenses. "Okay," he said gently. "Okay. Is there someone else? A relative? A foster family?" Elijah's expression shuttered completely. "I ran away. I'm not going back." "Back where?" "The group home." The words came out hard, bitter, the kind of bitterness that no 9-year-old should know. "They don't want me there anyway. Nobody wants me anywhere." Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the rain fall, thinking about all the things he should say. He should tell the boy that running away wasn't the answer. He should call the authorities, report a missing child, let the system handle it. That's what a responsible adult would do. But Marcus had seen what the system looked like from the other side. He'd watched his own brother get chewed up and spit out by foster care 20 years ago. He'd seen the hollow look in kids' eyes at the VA, children of veterans who'd fallen through every crack society had to offer. "How long have you been out here?" he asked instead. Elijah shrugged, a gesture that was trying very hard to look casual and failing. "A while." "How long is a while?" 3 days. 3 days. 3 days this child had been living on the streets of Chicago in November. 3 days of cold and rain and hunger and fear. Marcus felt a surge of anger, not at the boy, but at every single adult who had let this happen. "Have you eaten anything?" Elijah shook his head, then seemed to reconsider. "I found some stuff, behind restaurants." It wasn't that bad. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, taking a breath. When he opened them again, his mind was made up. "Listen to me, Elijah. I'm not going to force you to do anything. But it's cold out here, and it's going to get colder tonight. There's a diner a couple blocks from here. They make good hot chocolate. Why don't you come with me, get something warm in your stomach, and we can figure out what to do next? No pressure. If you want to leave after that, I won't stop you." Elijah studied him with those 2 old eyes, clearly weighing the offer against every bad experience that had taught him not to trust adults. "Why would you do that?" "You don't even know me." "Because you're a kid alone in an alley in the rain, and I'm not the kind of person who can walk away from that." Marcus pushed himself to his feet, offering his hand to the boy. "And because when I was about your age, someone helped me when I needed it. I figure it's time I passed that along." For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Then slowly Elijah reached out and took Marcus's hand. His fingers were ice cold, and his grip was weak, but it was there. It was a start. They walked out of the alley together, the rain still falling, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself since coming home from the war. He didn't know what was going to happen next. He didn't have a plan. All he knew was that for the first time in 18 months, he had a reason to think about something other than his own demons. The diner was called Maria's, and it had been a fixture on this corner since before Marcus was born. The sign outside was missing half its lights, and the vinyl booths were patched in places with duct tape. But the food was good, and the coffee was strong, and the owner didn't ask too many questions. It was the kind of place where people came to be left alone, which suited Marcus just fine. He pushed open the door, and the warmth hit him like a wave. The smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee filled the air, and a jukebox in the corner was playing something old and sad. There were only a handful of other customers, an elderly couple sharing a piece of pie, a truck driver nursing a cup of coffee at the counter, a woman in nurse's scrubs staring at her phone with exhausted eyes. "Anywhere you like, honey," called the waitress, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes, and a name tag that read Dolores. She looked at Elijah with the practiced assessment of someone who'd seen everything, but she didn't comment. She just grabbed 2 menus and led them to a booth in the back corner. Elijah slid onto the bench seat, pulling his knees up to his chest. He was still shivering, even in the warmth of the diner. Marcus sat across from him, close enough to talk, but far enough not to crowd. "You want that hot chocolate I mentioned?" Marcus asked. "They make it from scratch here. Real milk, real chocolate. It's pretty good." Elijah nodded, his eyes fixed on the table. "What else? Burger? Eggs? Whatever you want." "I don't have any money. I know I'm buying." The boy looked up at that, suspicious. "Why?" "Because you're hungry, and I can afford to buy you dinner. That's reason enough." Marcus picked up his own menu, even though he knew it by heart. "I'm going to have the meatloaf. My therapist says I should eat more vegetables, so I'll get the green beans too, even though they come from a can and taste like it." He was rewarded with the ghost of a smile. Just a flicker, barely there, but it was something. Dolores came back, and Marcus ordered for both of them, meatloaf and green beans for himself, a cheeseburger and fries for Elijah, and 2 hot chocolates with extra whipped cream. She wrote it down without comment and disappeared into the kitchen. "You said you were a soldier," Elijah said after she left. It wasn't quite a question, but it was close. "That's right. Army. 18 years. Did you ever shoot anyone?" It wasn't the question Marcus had expected, but kids never asked the questions you expected. "Yes," he said honestly. "I did. That was part of my job." "Did it feel bad?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question. It deserved a real answer. "Some of it did. War is complicated. Sometimes you have to do things to protect the people next to you, and those things stay with you. But I tried to be a good soldier. I tried to do what was right, even when it was hard to know what right was." Elijah nodded slowly, as if this made sense to him in a way that it shouldn't have made sense to a 9-year-old. "My dad was in the army too," he said, "before he died." Marcus felt that tightening in his chest again. "I'm sorry," he said. "When did he pass?" 2 years ago. He got sick, something with his brain." Elijah's voice was flat, matter of fact, the way people sounded when they'd told a story so many times it had lost all its edges. "He came back from overseas, and he wasn't the same. My mom said the war broke something in him. Then one day he just went to sleep and didn't wake up." Marcus knew what that meant. He'd known soldiers who'd taken that way out, men and women who'd made it through firefights and ambushes and everything the enemy could throw at them, only to be defeated by the war inside their own heads. It was an epidemic that nobody wanted to talk about, a casualty count that didn't make the news. "What about your mother?" he asked gently. "She tried to keep it together after Dad died. For a while she did okay, but then she started drinking. A lot. She'd disappear for days sometimes. The neighbors called social services, and they took me away." Elijah's jaw tightened. "She said she'd get better. She said she'd come back for me. That was 1.5 years ago." "And the group home?" "It's fine." The word was sharp, defensive. "There's a bed. They give you food, but it's not—" He trailed off, searching for words. "There's this kid there, Marcus. His name is Terrence. He's bigger than everyone else, and he picks on the smaller kids, takes their stuff. Hurts them when the adults aren't looking. I tried to tell the people who work there, but they didn't believe me, or they didn't care. I don't know which is worse." Marcus felt his hands curl into fists under the table. He forced himself to relax. "Is that why you ran away? Because of Terrence?" Elijah nodded, his eyes dropping back to the table. "He said he was going to really hurt me this time. Something bad. And I believed him. So I left before he got the chance." The hot chocolate arrived. 2 steaming mugs with mountains of whipped cream on top. Elijah wrapped his hands around his cup like it was the most precious thing in the world, and Marcus watched him take his first sip. Watched the way his eyes widened slightly, the way some of the tension left his shoulders. "This is really good," Elijah whispered, and there was wonder in his voice, the kind of wonder that came from simple pleasures too long denied. "Told you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking their hot chocolate, waiting for the food to arrive. The rain continued to beat against the windows, and the jukebox switched to another song, something about lost love and empty highways. The diner felt like a bubble, a small pocket of warmth and safety in a cold and complicated world. "Can I ask you something?" Elijah said eventually. "Sure." "Why do you walk funny? Is it because of the war?" Marcus almost laughed. "Kids really didn't have filters." "Yeah, it's because of the war. I got hurt pretty bad a couple years ago. My leg doesn't work as well as it used to. The doctors say it'll get better with time and therapy, but I don't think it'll ever be completely right again." "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes. Today's not a great day." Elijah considered this, his brow furrowed. "My dad had headaches," he said, "really bad ones. They made him mean sometimes. He'd yell, and then he'd feel terrible about it afterward. He'd sit in his room with all the lights off and cry. I could hear him through the wall." Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. He knew about those headaches. He knew about a lot of things that Elijah's father had probably experienced. The nightmares, the flashbacks, the feeling of being constantly on edge, waiting for danger that never came, because the danger was inside you now, part of your own wiring. "Your dad loved you," Marcus said. "Whatever else was going on with him, I'm sure of that. Sometimes the war hurts people in ways that are hard to see, and those wounds can be harder to heal than the ones that bleed. But that doesn't mean he didn't love you." Elijah's eyes were shimmering now, and he blinked rapidly, trying to keep the tears from falling. "I know," he whispered. "I know he did." The food arrived then, saving them both from the weight of the moment. Elijah stared at his cheeseburger like he wasn't quite sure it was real, then picked it up and took a bite so big Marcus was afraid he might choke. "Easy," Marcus said with a small smile. "It's not going anywhere. Take your time." Elijah slowed down, but only slightly. He was hungry in a way that went beyond missing a few meals, the kind of hungry that came from uncertainty, from not knowing where your next food would come from, or if it would come at all. Marcus recognized that hunger. He'd seen it in refugee camps, in villages devastated by war. He'd felt it himself, in a different way, during his lowest points after coming home. They ate in silence, and Marcus found himself watching Elijah, the way he hunched protectively over his plate, the way his eyes kept darting to the door as if expecting trouble, the way he startled at sudden sounds. The kid was wired for survival, operating on pure instinct, and it broke Marcus's heart. When the plates were empty and Elijah was working on his third refill of hot chocolate, he finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air between them all evening. "What happens now?" Marcus sighed, setting down his coffee cup. "That's a good question. I'm not going to lie to you, Elijah. I don't have all the answers. What I do know is that you can't stay on the streets. It's too dangerous, especially for a kid your age. But I also heard what you said about the group home, and I'm not going to send you back to a place where someone's threatening to hurt you." "So what then?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." He paused, meeting Elijah's eyes. "Together. I'm not going to disappear on you. I promise you that." Elijah stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see the war happening behind his eyes, the desperate desire to believe fighting against every lesson life had taught him about trusting adults. It was a battle that couldn't be won with words, only with time and consistency and proving through actions that promises meant something. Okay, Elijah said finally. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. Marcus paid the bill and left a generous tip for Dolores, who gave him a knowing look as they headed for the door. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the streetlights were flickering on, casting pools of orange light on the wet pavement. "Where are we going?" Elijah asked. Marcus hesitated. He knew what he should do. Call social services, report a runaway, let the professionals handle it. But he also knew what that would mean for Elijah. More uncertainty. More time in a system that had already failed him. More chances for kids like Terence to make his life miserable. "My apartment isn't far from here," he said slowly. "It's not much, but it's warm and dry, and there's a couch you can sleep on tonight. Tomorrow morning we can talk about what comes next, figure out our options." Elijah's eyes went wide. "You'd let me stay with you? For tonight, at least. We can take it one step at a time." The boy was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then in a voice so small Marcus almost missed it, he asked, "Can I go home with you?" The words hit Marcus like a punch to the chest, not because of what they said, but because of everything behind them. The loneliness, the fear, the desperate hope of a child who had been abandoned too many times. "Yeah, buddy," Marcus said, his voice rough. "You can come home with me." They walked through the wet streets together, the city lights reflecting off puddles, the traffic noise fading as they moved into the quieter residential blocks. Elijah stuck close to Marcus's side, not quite touching, but near enough that Marcus could feel his presence, like a stray dog following a stranger, not quite ready to trust, but too hungry for kindness to stay away. Marcus's apartment building was a 5-story brick structure that had been built in the 1940s and hadn't been updated much since. The lobby smelled like old carpet and cigarette smoke, and the elevator had been broken for as long as Marcus had lived there. They climbed the stairs slowly, Marcus's knee screaming with each step, Elijah matching his pace without comment. "This is it," Marcus said, unlocking the door to apartment 4C. "Home sweet home." The apartment was small but clean, a living room with a worn couch and an older television, a kitchenette with a stove and a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, a bathroom with a shower that took forever to get warm, and a bedroom just big enough for a bed and a dresser. The walls were bare, except for a single framed photograph of Marcus's unit taken somewhere in Afghanistan, all of them smiling like they didn't know what was coming. Elijah stood in the doorway, taking it all in. "It's nice," he said, and Marcus could tell he meant it. "It's not much, but it's mine." Marcus closed the door behind them and locked it. 2 deadbolts and a chain, old habits from the war. "Bathroom's through there if you want to clean up. I think I've got some clothes that might fit you. They'll be too big, but they're dry." He dug through his dresser and found an old t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants with a drawstring waist. They were enormous on Elijah, but the boy didn't seem to mind. He emerged from the bathroom with his face scrubbed clean and his wet clothes bundled in his arms, looking younger and more vulnerable than ever. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. You don't have to thank me." Marcus took the wet clothes and hung them over the radiator to dry. "You want to watch some TV? I've got basic cable, which means about 15 channels of stuff that's barely worth watching." They ended up on the couch together, watching a nature documentary about penguins in Antarctica. Elijah sat with his knees pulled up, the oversized t-shirt draped over them like a tent, his eyes growing heavy as the warmth of the apartment seeped into his bones. Within 20 minutes, he was asleep, his head slowly tilting until it came to rest against Marcus's shoulder. Marcus sat very still, afraid to move and wake him. He looked down at the boy's face, peaceful now in sleep, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose. For months he'd been drifting, going through the motions of recovery without really believing in it. The therapy sessions, the job applications, the attempts to reconnect with old friends. It all felt hollow, like acting in a play he'd never auditioned for, but this was real. This was a kid who needed help, and Marcus was in a position to give it. It wasn't a complicated equation. It was the simplest thing in the world. He reached for his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for, Sandra Chen. She was a social worker he'd met at the VA, someone who worked with veterans' families and their children. If anyone would know how to help Elijah without throwing him back into a system that had failed him, it was her. He typed out a text message. "Need to talk to you about something. It's important. Can you meet tomorrow?" The response came a few minutes later. Of course, coffee, 10 a.m. at the usual place. He confirmed and set down his phone, then carefully maneuvered himself and Elijah so they were both lying down on the couch, the boy's head on a pillow and a blanket pulled over him. Marcus took the armchair across the room, too wired to sleep, but content to keep watch. Outside, the rain had stopped, and through the window he could see a sliver of moon emerging from behind the clouds. The city was quiet, or as quiet as cities ever got, and in the small apartment a boy who had been alone in the world was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Marcus didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know if he was doing the right thing, or if his own demons would get in the way, or if the system would find a way to take Elijah away despite his best intentions. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to give up without a fight. He'd made a promise. And Marcus Cole kept his promises. The morning came too early, grey light filtering through the thin curtains and the sound of traffic starting to build on the street below. Marcus woke with a crick in his neck from sleeping in the armchair, his legs stiff and sore from the previous day's exertions. For a moment he forgot where he was and why, the disorientation of waking in an unfamiliar position, the half-second of thinking he was back in the barracks or worse, back overseas. Then he saw Elijah still sleeping on the couch, one arm hanging off the edge, his face relaxed and peaceful, and everything came rushing back. He got up quietly and made his way to the kitchenette, where he started a pot of coffee and began rummaging through the refrigerator for something resembling breakfast. His options were limited: some eggs past their prime, a half-empty carton of milk, a package of bacon he'd bought on sale and forgotten about. It would have to do. The smell of cooking bacon woke Elijah, who sat up on the couch with a startled expression, clearly having forgotten where he was too. His eyes found Marcus in the kitchen, and Marcus watched the recognition dawn on his face, followed by something that looked almost like relief. "Morning," Marcus said. "You hungry?" Elijah nodded, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Good. Breakfast will be ready in a few minutes. There's a new toothbrush under the sink if you want to clean up." By the time Elijah emerged from the bathroom, Marcus had 2 plates of scrambled eggs and bacon on the small table by the window. They ate in companionable silence, watching the street below come to life. People hurrying to work, cars jockeying for position, a woman walking 3 dogs who seemed determined to go in 3 different directions. "I have to meet someone this morning," Marcus said when they were finished. "A friend of mine. She's a social worker, but before you panic, hear me out. She's not like the ones you've dealt with before. She actually cares about helping people, not just pushing papers. I want to talk to her about your situation, see if there are options we haven't thought of." Elijah's expression had gone wary at the words social worker, but he didn't bolt. Progress. "What kind of options?" "I don't know yet. That's what I want to find out. But I'm not going to let them send you back to a place where you're not safe. That's not an option. We'll figure out something else." "What if there isn't something else?" Marcus leaned forward, holding Elijah's gaze. "Then we'll make something else. I told you last night that I wasn't going to disappear on you, and I meant it. We're in this together now." "Okay." Elijah studied him for a long moment. searching for something in Marcus's face. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him, because he nodded slowly. "Okay. Good. Now I can't leave you here alone, so you're going to have to come with me. Sandra's going to want to talk to you eventually anyway, but you don't have to say anything today if you're not ready. Just sit with us, eat a muffin, let me do the talking. Deal?" "Deal." They left the apartment a little before 10. Elijah wearing his own clothes now that they'd dried overnight. Marcus moving slowly on his bad leg, but refusing to show weakness. The coffee shop where he usually met Sandra was a 10-minute walk away, a small, independent place called the Daily Grind that served decent coffee and didn't mind if you sat for hours nursing a single cup. Sandra was already there when they arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She was a small woman in her 50s, with greying hair pulled back in a practical bun and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked up as they approached, and Marcus saw her eyes flick to Elijah, assessing, then back to Marcus with a question in her expression. "Sandra, this is Elijah. Elijah, this is Sandra Chen. She's one of the good ones." "Hello, Elijah," Sandra said warmly. Not extending her hand, she was smart enough to know that some kids didn't like being touched by strangers. "It's nice to meet you. Marcus says you're a friend of his." Elijah nodded warily, sliding into the booth next to Marcus. He positioned himself so that he had a clear view of the door, his shoulders tense. Always watching, always ready to run. "Marcus," Sandra said, "why don't you tell me what's going on?" Marcus took a deep breath and started from the beginning, the bus stop, the alley, the conversation at Maria's diner. He told her about Elijah's father, about his mother's drinking, about the group home and the bully named Terence. He told her about the 3 days on the street and the look in Elijah's eyes when he'd asked to come home with him. Sandra listened without interrupting, her expression carefully neutral. Marcus knew that look. It was the face she wore when she was processing a lot of information and trying to figure out the best path forward. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to Elijah. "Can I ask you some questions, Elijah? You don't have to answer if you don't want to." Elijah glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "Okay," the boy said. "The group home you were staying at, can you tell me its name?" "Whitmore House, on the south side." Sandra's eyebrows rose slightly. "I know Whitmore. I've worked with some of the kids there." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "This boy you mentioned, Terence, did he ever actually hurt you physically?" Elijah was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. Then he pulled up his sleeve, revealing a series of bruises on his forearm, yellowed with age but still visible. "He did this last week. Said it was just a preview." Sandra's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw something harden in her eyes. "Did you tell anyone about this?" "I tried. They said I was making it up, said I probably got it from roughhousing, but I didn't." His voice cracked slightly. "I didn't." "I believe you," Sandra said firmly. "And I'm sorry that nobody else did. That's not okay, and it shouldn't have happened." Elijah blinked rapidly, caught off guard by the validation. Marcus remembered what that felt like, being believed after no one else would listen. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. "Here's what I can tell you," Sandra continued, leaning forward. "The system isn't perfect. It's full of overworked people and underfunded programs and kids who fall through the cracks. But there are also people who are trying to make it better, and I like to think I'm one of them." She looked at Marcus. "What are you thinking?" Marcus had been turning this over in his mind all night, afraid to say it out loud because saying it would make it real. But now, sitting here with Elijah beside him and Sandra across the table, the words came out before he could stop them. "I want to take care of him," he said, "officially. Whatever that means. Foster care, guardianship, I don't know." but I want to be the person responsible for him. I want to give him a home." The silence that followed was heavy. Elijah was staring at him with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Sandra's face had gone carefully blank. "Marcus," she said slowly, "that's not a small thing you're talking about. Becoming a foster parent, especially for someone with Elijah's history, is a significant commitment. There are background checks, home inspections, training programs. It takes months, sometimes longer, and frankly," she hesitated, "go on. Your own situation isn't exactly stable. You're still in recovery. You're not working. You're dealing with your own trauma." "I'm not saying those are disqualifying factors, but they're things that would be looked at very carefully." Marcus nodded. He'd expected this. "I know, but I also know what it's like to be lost and alone and feel like nobody gives a damn whether you live or die. I've been there. And I've seen too many kids end up on the streets or worse because the system couldn't figure out what to do with them." He looked at Elijah. "This kid's father was a soldier. He served his country, and then he came home broken, and the country let him down, let his whole family down. I can't fix what happened to his dad, but maybe I can do something for him." Sandra was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed and pulled out a small notebook. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to make some calls about Whitmore House. If what Elijah's saying is true, and I believe it is, that needs to be addressed. No child should be in a place where they're being hurt and no one's listening. And then we explore your options. There are emergency placement procedures for situations like this. If I can document that Elijah was in an unsafe environment, and that returning him there would put him at risk, we can make a case for an alternative placement. That's not a guarantee. The system has a lot of rules, but it's a starting point." "What about Marcus?" Elijah asked suddenly. Both adults turned to look at him. Could he be the alternative placement? Sandra's expression softened. "That's what we're going to try to figure out. But it's going to take time, and there are going to be a lot of steps along the way. Can you be patient?" Elijah looked at Marcus, and something passed between them, an understanding, a mutual agreement to trust in something bigger than either of them. "Yeah," he said, "I can be patient." Sandra nodded. "Good. In the meantime, Marcus, I'm going to need you to keep him safe. Can you do that?" "Yes," Marcus said without hesitation. "I can do that." They left the coffee shop with a plan, or at least the beginning of one. Sandra promised to make calls that afternoon and get back to them by evening. In the meantime, Marcus was to take Elijah back to his apartment and lie low. No school, no unnecessary outings, nothing that might attract attention from the wrong people. "What happens if they find me?" Elijah asked as they walked back through the grey streets. "The people from Whitmore?" "They won't," Marcus said. "Not while you're with me." "But what if they do?" Marcus stopped walking and turned to face the boy. "Elijah, listen to me. I've spent 18 years of my life protecting people. It's what I was trained to do, and it's what I'm good at. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. Not Terrence, not the people from Whitmore, not anyone. Do you understand?" Elijah nodded slowly, but there was still fear in his eyes, fear that Marcus couldn't chase away with words, only with time and consistency. "Come on," Marcus said, starting to walk again. "Let's get home." The rest of the day passed quietly. They watched more television, played cards with a worn deck Marcus found in a drawer, and ate lunch from the dwindling supplies in Marcus's kitchen. By mid-afternoon, Marcus realized they needed groceries, but the thought of leaving the apartment with Elijah in tow felt risky. He'd have to figure something out. His phone rang at 4:30, Sandra's number on the display. "What did you find out?" he asked without preamble. "I made some calls," Sandra said. Her voice was tight, controlled. "You were right about Whitmore. I talked to a few colleagues who've worked with kids from there, and what they told me." Let's just say I'm filing a formal complaint with the licensing board. This isn't the first time there have been problems. What about Elijah? That's where it gets complicated. He's technically still in the custody of the state. His mother's parental rights haven't been terminated, which means there's still a legal framework in place. Running away doesn't change that. So, what are our options? Sandra was quiet for a moment. There's a procedure called voluntary kinship care. It's usually used when a relative steps forward to take responsibility for a child in the system, but it can be extended to non-relatives in certain circumstances. The key is establishing a connection, a reason why you, specifically, should be entrusted with this child's care. His father was a soldier, Marcus said, like me. We served in different units, but we both wore the uniform. That has to count for something. It might. It's not a strong legal connection, but it's a starting point. I'm going to need to document everything. Your military service, your current situation, your living conditions. Are you willing to submit to a background check? Yes. Home inspection? Yes. And you understand that even if everything goes perfectly, this is going to take time, weeks, maybe months. I understand. Another pause. Okay, Marcus, I'm going to go out on a limb here because I've known you long enough to trust your judgment. I'm going to recommend emergency placement with you while we sort out the paperwork. It's not standard procedure, and I'm going to have to call in some favors, but I think I can make it happen. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Thank you, Sandra. I mean it. Don't thank me yet. There are going to be a lot of hoops to jump through, and if anything goes wrong, my neck is on the line. But that kid deserves a chance, and so do you. She paused. Take care of him, Marcus. I will. He hung up and turned to find Elijah watching him with wide eyes. Well, the boy asked. What did she say? Marcus allowed himself a small smile. She said we're going to make this work. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, interviews and official visits. Sandra was true to her word, pushing through the emergency placement faster than Marcus had thought possible. There were background checks and home inspections, interviews with social workers, and assessments by child psychologists. Marcus answered every question honestly, held nothing back, and hoped it would be enough. Through it all, Elijah was a quiet presence at his side, watching, waiting, not quite believing that this might actually work out. Marcus understood. He barely believed it himself. The hardest part was the interview with Elijah's mother. Her name was Denise, and she was being held at a treatment facility on the north side of the city. Sandra had arranged the visit, explaining that it was necessary for the legal process. Denise needed to give her consent for Elijah to be placed with Marcus, at least temporarily. They went on a cold December morning, the sky heavy with clouds that threatened snow. Elijah hadn't spoken a word the entire drive, his face pressed against the window, watching the city slide by. You don't have to see her if you don't want to, Marcus said as they pulled into the parking lot. I can go in alone, explain the situation. No, Elijah's voice was firm. I want to see her. The facility was clean and institutional, all white walls and fluorescent lights. A receptionist led them to a common room where visitors could meet with patients, and they sat at a small table by the window, waiting. When Denise walked in, Marcus could see the resemblance immediately. The same dark hair, the same brown eyes, the same shape of the face, but where Elijah was young and still forming, Denise looked worn down, hollowed out by life and its disappointments. She was thin, too thin, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat down across from them. "Hi, baby," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Elijah didn't say anything. He just sat there, rigid, his hands balled into fists in his lap. Marcus cleared his throat. Miss Carter, my name is Marcus Cole. I've been taking care of Elijah for the past few weeks, and I'd like to continue doing so. There are legal procedures we need to follow, and one of them requires your consent." Denise barely seemed to hear him. Her eyes were fixed on Elijah, tears streaming down her face. "I tried, baby. I tried so hard after your daddy died, but I just couldn't. I couldn't hold it together. I'm so sorry. You left me." The words came out of Elijah like bullets, hard and fast. "You promised you'd come back for me, and you didn't. You left me in that place with those people, and you never came back." I know I did, but I'm getting better now. The doctors here are helping me. I'm going to get clean and then... "And then what?" Elijah's voice rose, shaking with anger and hurt. "You're going to come get me? Take me home? We're going to be a family again?" Denise flinched. I want to try." "It's too late." The anger drained out of Elijah as quickly as it had come, leaving behind something emptier and sadder. "I waited for you for 1.5 years. Every day I thought maybe today she'll come. Maybe today she'll remember she has a son. But you never did. Elijah, I want to stay with Marcus." He turned to look at Marcus, his eyes pleading. "Please, I want to stay with you." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He looked at Denise, saw the devastation on her face, and felt a complicated mix of sympathy and anger. This woman had failed her son in every way that mattered, but she was also sick, broken by loss and addiction, struggling against demons that Marcus understood all too well. "Ms. Carter," he said gently, "I'm not trying to take your son away from you, but right now you're not in a position to care for him, and he needs stability. He needs a safe place to live, someone to look after him, a chance to be a kid without worrying about whether the adults in his life are going to disappear." Denise's face crumpled. "I know," she whispered. "I know I'm not. I know I can't. I'm asking you to let me take care of him, not forever necessarily, just for now, until things are more stable. You can still be part of his life, but he needs something you can't give him right now." There was a long, painful silence. Denise looked at Elijah, really looked at him, and Marcus could see the war happening inside her, the desire to fight, to hold on, struggling against the knowledge that letting go was the right thing to do. "Do you want this?" she asked Elijah. "Do you really want to live with him?" Elijah nodded, his eyes shimmering with tears he was fighting not to shed. "Yeah, Mom, I do." Denise closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something had shifted. She looked older, sadder, but also somehow more at peace. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay. I'll sign whatever you need me to sign." Marcus let out a breath. "Thank you." "But I want to see him," Denise continued, her voice growing stronger. "When I'm better, when I'm out of here and I've got my life back together, I want to be part of his life." "That's fair." Marcus looked at Elijah. "Would you be okay with that? Seeing your mum sometimes, once she's better?" Elijah was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Yeah, I think I'd like that." Denise reached across the table and took her son's hand. Elijah flinched but didn't pull away. They sat like that for a moment, mother and son, connected by something that couldn't be erased no matter how much damage had been done. "I love you, Elijah," Denise said. "I know I haven't shown it. I know I've messed everything up. But I love you more than anything in this world." "I know, Mom." Elijah's voice was barely a whisper. "I know you do." They left the treatment facility an hour later, the paperwork signed and witnessed. Elijah was quiet on the drive home, staring out the window again, processing everything that had happened. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "I don't know." Elijah's voice was small, uncertain. "I thought I'd feel, I don't know, different, better." But I just feel sad. Marcus nodded. That makes sense. What happened in there was hard. It's okay to feel sad about it. She's really sick, isn't she? Like in her head. She's struggling with addiction. It's a disease like any other disease. Some people can beat it, some people can't. But it doesn't change who she is underneath, or how much she loves you. Elijah was quiet for a while longer. Then, Marcus? Yeah? Thank you for everything. For finding me in that alley, for buying me dinner, for wanting me when nobody else did. Marcus felt his eyes sting. He kept them fixed on the road, blinking rapidly. You're worth wanting, Elijah. Don't ever let anyone make you think otherwise. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. Winter settled over Chicago, heavy and cold, blanketing the city in snow and ice. Marcus's apartment, which had once felt empty and purposeless, now hummed with the energy of a life being built. Elijah started school again, a new school, in Marcus's neighborhood, far away from Whitmore House and Terence and all the other ghosts of his past. He was behind in some subjects and ahead in others, a patchwork of gaps and strengths that his teachers were working to even out. He had trouble making friends at first, too used to keeping his guard up, but slowly, gradually, he began to open up. Marcus found a rhythm to his days that he hadn't had since leaving the army. He walked Elijah to school in the mornings, his leg protesting but stronger now, with regular use. He went to his therapy appointments and his physical therapy sessions. He started cooking again, actual meals instead of the frozen dinners and takeout that had sustained him for the past year and a half. Sandra came by regularly, checking on them, tracking their progress. The official approval for Marcus to be Elijah's long-term foster parent came through in February, on a day so cold that the wind seemed to cut through every layer of clothing. Marcus read the letter 3 times before he believed it, then showed it to Elijah, who read it twice and then burst into tears. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked, alarmed. "This is good news." "I know," Elijah said between sobs. "I know it is. I never thought anyone would actually—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Marcus understood. He pulled the boy into a hug, holding him tight while he cried, feeling the weight of everything they'd both been through pressing down on them. "It's real," Marcus said softly. "This is real, and I'm not going anywhere." Spring came slowly to Chicago, the snow melting into grey slush before finally giving way to green. Marcus and Elijah celebrated the change in season by going to the park, something they'd started doing on weekends when the weather allowed. Elijah had discovered a talent for basketball that Marcus couldn't match, his bad leg making anything more athletic than a light jog impossible. But he liked watching, liked seeing the joy on Elijah's face when he made a difficult shot. One Saturday afternoon, as they walked home from the park, Elijah asked a question that Marcus had been expecting for months. "What happens when I grow up?" Marcus looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, foster care ends when you're 18, right? So what happens then? Do I just leave?" Marcus stopped walking. They were in front of their building now, the familiar brick facade that had become home. "Elijah, look at me." The boy turned to face him, his expression guarded, bracing for bad news. "Being a family isn't about legal paperwork," Marcus said. "It's not about foster care or custody arrangements or any of that. It's about choosing to be there for someone, no matter what. And I choose you, not just until you're 18, forever. But no buts. You're my family now. When you're 18, when you're 30, when you're 60, you'll always have a home with me. Always, do you understand?" Elijah's eyes were wide, searching Marcus's face for any sign of deception and finding none. "You mean it?" "I mean it." They stood there for a moment, the spring breeze ruffling their hair, the city bustling around them. Then Elijah smiled, A real smile, the kind that reached his eyes, and Marcus felt something inside him heal. "Okay," Elijah said, "forever." They went inside and started making dinner together, moving around the small kitchen with the easy familiarity of people who knew each other's rhythms. The apartment was full of noise and life and purpose. The sound of vegetables being chopped, water boiling on the stove, a radio playing softly in the background, and Marcus Cole, who had spent 18 years fighting other people's wars and another year and a half fighting his own, finally knew what it meant to come home. The summer brought changes, as summers often do. Marcus, with Sandra's encouragement and his therapist's blessing, started looking for work, real work, the kind that would give their little family more stability and security. His skills were specialized, but there were organizations that valued what he brought to the table: discipline, leadership, the ability to stay calm in crisis. He found a job with a veterans non-profit, helping other soldiers navigate the transition back to civilian life. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough, and more importantly, it gave him a sense of meaning. Every day he met people who were struggling the way he had struggled, men and women who had given everything for their country and were now trying to figure out how to live in a world that didn't quite know what to do with them. He told them his story sometimes, the abbreviated version at least, about the IED that had taken his leg's full function and in some ways his sense of self. About the months of feeling lost and purposeless, wondering if he'd ever be whole again. About a rainy night in November and a boy hiding in an alley who had asked a simple question that had changed everything. "Can I go home with you?" Such a small question, such an enormous answer. Elijah, meanwhile, was thriving. His grades were improving, his circle of friends was growing, and the wariness that had defined his first months with Marcus was slowly fading. He was still cautious, still guarded in certain ways. The scars of his past didn't disappear overnight, but he was also learning to trust again, to believe that the people in his life would be there when he needed them. He started calling Marcus Dad on a Tuesday evening in July, so casually that Marcus almost missed it. "Hey, Dad, can I have some more mashed potatoes?" Marcus froze, the serving spoon hovering over the bowl. "What did you call me?" Elijah's eyes went wide, suddenly uncertain. I'm sorry, I didn't mean I can call you Marcus if you—" "No?" Marcus set down the spoon and looked at Elijah, really looked at him. "No, don't apologize, you caught me off guard, that's all." "Is it okay that I called you that?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, buddy, it's more than okay." Elijah's face broke into a grin, the same grin Marcus had seen that first night at Maria's diner when he'd tasted real hot chocolate for the first time in days. "Good. Because it felt weird calling you Marcus all the time. You're not just some random guy, you're my dad." My dad. 2 words that Marcus had never expected to hear directed at him, 2 words that meant more than any medal or commendation he'd ever received. "Pass me your plate," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You can have all the mashed potatoes you want." The years passed, as years do, each one bringing its own challenges and triumphs. Elijah grew taller, his voice deepening, his personality developing into something Marcus was proud to witness. He had his father's stubbornness and his mother's resilience, tempered by the hardships he'd survived and the love he'd found. Denise came back into their lives gradually, as she'd promised. She finished her treatment program and got a job, slowly rebuilding the life she'd lost. Her relationship with Elijah was complicated. There were good days and bad days, moments of connection and moments of tension, but they were working on it, one step at a time. Marcus's leg never fully healed, but it got better. He walked without a cane now, though he still limped on cold days and couldn't run the way he used to. He'd made peace with that limitation, the way he'd made peace with so many others. Sandra continued to check in on them, even after the official foster arrangement was no longer necessary. She'd become a family friend, someone who shared dinner with them every month or so and never failed to bring homemade cookies that Elijah claimed were better than anything Marcus could make. "You've done good, Marcus," she said one evening, watching Elijah through the window as he shot hoops in the small court behind their building. They'd moved to a bigger apartment a year ago, 2 bedrooms now, with a real kitchen and windows that let in plenty of light. "That kid is a different person than the one I met 3 years ago." Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "He did the hard work himself. I just gave him a place to do it." "Don't sell yourself short. You gave him more than that. You gave him hope. You gave him a future." She turned to look at him, her expression serious. "You gave him a family." Marcus watched Elijah make a 3-pointer, heard the boy whoop with triumph, and felt that familiar warmth in his chest, the feeling that had first appeared in a rainy alley and had grown stronger every day since. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I guess I did." The memory came to Marcus sometimes, unbidden, that November day, 3 years ago, standing in the rain, looking at a frightened boy hiding behind a dumpster. He'd had no plan, no idea what he was getting himself into. He'd just known that he couldn't walk away, couldn't leave a child alone and afraid in a city that didn't seem to care. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks and struggles, moments when Marcus had doubted himself, wondered if he was really equipped to be a father to a kid who'd been through so much. There had been fights and misunderstandings, nights when Elijah had nightmares, and days when Marcus's own demons got the better of him. But they'd made it through, together. And looking at their life now, the home they'd built, the family they'd become, Marcus knew that the decision he'd made that day was the best one he'd ever made. The night of Elijah's middle school graduation, Marcus sat in the auditorium with the other parents, watching as the students filed onto the stage. Elijah was toward the end of the procession, wearing a suit that Marcus had bought for him the week before. He looked grown up, confident, nothing like the scared kid who'd hidden in an alley all those years ago. When they called Elijah's name, Marcus stood up and cheered, louder than any of the other parents. Elijah shot him an embarrassed look, but Marcus could see the smile playing at the corners of his mouth. After the ceremony, they went out for dinner, just the 2 of them, to a nice restaurant downtown that Marcus had been saving up for. Elijah ordered a steak and talked non-stop about his plans for high school, the classes he wanted to take, the friends he hoped to make. Marcus listened, nodding in all the right places, his heart full. "Hey, Dad," Elijah said eventually, pushing the last bite of steak around his plate. "Yeah? Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't found me that day, in the alley?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Usually when I can't sleep, I think about all the ways things could have gone differently, the choices I could have made, the paths not taken. What do you think would have happened to me?" "I don't know, buddy, and honestly, I try not to think about it too much. What matters is what did happen, what is happening right now in this moment." Elijah nodded slowly. "I think about it sometimes too. I wonder if I'd still be at Whitmore or on the streets or—" He trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. "But then I remember that it doesn't matter, because you were there. You chose to stop, to talk to me, to bring me home with you. And that changed everything." Marcus reached across the table and ruffled Elijah's hair, earning another embarrassed look. "You changed things too, you know. Before you came along, I was just going through the motions. Wake up, go to therapy, come home, watch TV, go to sleep. Repeat. I didn't have anything to look forward to, anyone to take care of. You gave me a reason to be better." "We saved each other," Elijah said softly. Marcus smiled. "Yeah, I guess we did." They sat there for a while longer, finishing their food, talking about nothing and everything. Outside the restaurant windows, the city lights glittered against the night sky, and the world felt full of possibility. When they finally left, stepping out into the warm summer evening, Elijah slipped his hand into Marcus's, something he hadn't done since he was much younger. Marcus squeezed back, not saying anything, just holding on. They walked home together, father and son, two people who had found each other when they needed it most. The past was behind them, full of pain and loss and broken promises. But the future was ahead, stretching out like an open road, waiting to be traveled. And they would travel it together. The high school years brought new challenges. As expected, Elijah discovered a passion for science, spending hours in his room with books and experiments, dreaming of a future in medicine. He wanted to help people, he said. Specifically, he wanted to help veterans, people like his biological father, people who came home from war with invisible wounds that nobody knew how to heal. "I want to be a psychiatrist," he told Marcus one night, the two of them sitting on the fire escape outside their apartment, watching the sunset paint the Chicago skyline in shades of orange and pink. "Or maybe a psychologist. Someone who specializes in PTSD and trauma. I want to understand what happened to my dad, why his brain turned against him, and I want to help other people so they don't have to go through what he went through." Marcus felt a swell of pride so intense it almost hurt. "That's a good goal, Elijah, a really good goal. It's going to take a long time. College, then graduate school, then residency or whatever. I won't be making any money for years." "So? We'll figure it out. That's what we do." Elijah smiled, that same smile that had first appeared over hot chocolate in a diner on a rainy night. "Yeah, that's what we do." The college applications came and went, followed by acceptance letters and financial aid packages and long discussions about which school was the right fit. In the end, Elijah chose a university in the city. Close enough that he could come home on weekends, but far enough that he could start building a life of his own. The day Marcus drove him to campus for the first time, they both tried very hard not to cry, and both failed miserably. "It's not goodbye," Elijah said, hugging Marcus so hard it hurt. "It's just, see you later." "I know," Marcus said, his voice thick. "I know, buddy. I'm proud of you. So damn proud. I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have. You're stronger than you know. You always have been." Elijah pulled back, wiping his eyes. "I'll call you every day. You'd better." And he did, for the most part. There were busy weeks when the calls became texts, and busier weeks when even the texts became sparse. But the connection remained, unbroken, a thread stretching between them no matter how far apart they were. Marcus, meanwhile, continued his work at the Veterans Non-Profit, eventually moving into a leadership role. He spoke at conferences about the importance of mental health support for returning soldiers, about the crisis of veteran homelessness, about the children who were affected by their parents' service. He told his story, his and Elijah's, to anyone who would listen, hoping that it might inspire others to reach out, to help, to make a difference. One evening at a fundraising gala, a woman approached him after his speech. She was in her 40s, well-dressed, with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I just wanted to thank you. My husband served 2 tours in Iraq, and when he came home he was different, distant, angry. I didn't know what to do, and I almost gave up on our marriage. But hearing your story tonight, it gave me hope. It reminded me that healing is possible, that families can survive this." Marcus took her hand. "It's hard," he said honestly. "There are no easy answers, but you're right. Healing is possible. And so is love. Don't give up on him." She nodded, squeezing his hand. "I won't. Thank you." These moments made it all worthwhile. The long hours, the emotional weight of the work, the constant reminders of his own trauma. Knowing that he was making a difference, even a small one, gave meaning to everything he'd been through. The years continued to pass. Elijah graduated college with honors, then started graduate school, pursuing his dream of becoming a psychiatrist. He met someone along the way, a fellow student named Maya, who had kind eyes and a laugh that filled whatever room she was in. Marcus liked her immediately. "She's the one," Elijah said one Christmas. The three of them gathered around the small tree in Marcus's apartment. "I know we're still young, but I know." "How do you know?" Marcus asked. Elijah thought about it. "Because when I'm with her, I feel safe, like I can be myself, all of myself, even the parts I'm not proud of. She knows everything about my past, my dad, my mom, the group home, all of it, and she doesn't see me as broken. She just sees me." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's how you know." The proposal came a year later, followed by an engagement party that brought together all the pieces of their unconventional family. Sandra was there, gray-haired now, but still sharp as ever. Denise came too, sober for 5 years and counting, her relationship with Elijah finally on solid ground. Even some of Marcus's old army buddies made an appearance, men he hadn't seen in years, but who had dropped everything to celebrate with him. "Look at you," one of them said, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "A family man. Who would have thought?" "Not me," Marcus admitted. "Not in a million years. But here you are. Here I am." The wedding was small but beautiful, held in a garden on a perfect spring day. Elijah wore a suit that made him look every inch the man he'd become. Maya was radiant in white, her smile outshining the sun, and Marcus, standing at the front as Elijah's best man, felt his heart overflow with love and gratitude. When it came time for his toast, he kept it simple. "9 years ago," he said, "I met a boy hiding in an alley in the rain. He was scared and alone, and didn't believe that anyone in the world cared whether he lived or died. He asked me a question that night. 'Can I go home with you?' And I said yes. It was the best decision I ever made." He paused, looking at Elijah, at Maya, at the assembled guests. "That boy is standing in front of you today as a man, a good man, a kind, brilliant, compassionate man who is going to spend his life helping people who are hurting. And I am so incredibly proud to call him my son." His voice caught, but he pushed through. "Elijah, Maya, may your life together be filled with love and laughter and everything you deserve. I love you both." The applause was warm, but Marcus barely heard it. He was too busy looking at Elijah, at the tears streaming down his son's face, at the smile that held all the years they'd spent together. "I love you too, Dad," Elijah mouthed across the room. And Marcus knew with absolute certainty that this was what his life had been building toward. Not the medals or the service or the years of sacrifice. This moment, this family. Everything else was just a path to get here. The years rolled on, bringing joys and sorrows in equal measure. Marcus turned 60, then 65, his body slowing down, even as his spirit remained strong. His leg bothered him more now, the old injury making itself known with every change in weather. He'd moved to a smaller place, easier to manage, in a building with an elevator. Elijah had become a psychiatrist as he dreamed, specializing in veteran mental health. He and Maya had 2 children, a boy named Michael after Elijah's biological father, and a girl named Sandra after the social worker who had made their family possible. Marcus doted on his grandchildren with a devotion that surprised even himself. "Grandpa, tell us the story again," little Michael would demand during their visits. "The one about how you found Dad in the rain." And Marcus would tell it for the 100th time, the story that had become family legend. About a rainy November day and a boy hiding behind a dumpster. about a question that had changed 2 lives, about the years of hard work and healing that had brought them to where they were today. "And then, what happened?" Sandra would ask, even though she knew the answer by heart. "And then we became a family," Marcus would say, pulling both grandchildren into a hug, "and we lived happily ever after." It was a simplification, of course. Life wasn't a fairy tale. There had been struggles and setbacks, moments of despair and doubt, but the core of it was true. They had found each other, saved each other, built something beautiful out of nothing but chance and choice and love. The day Marcus received his diagnosis, Elijah was by his side. Cancer, the doctors said, aggressive, advanced, not much to be done. Marcus took the news with the same calm he'd brought to every other crisis in his life. "How long?" he asked. "A few months." "Maybe 6, he nodded, processed, accepted. "Okay." Elijah was less composed. "There has to be something," he insisted, pacing the doctor's office. "Treatment options, clinical trials." "Elijah," Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "Son, it's okay." "It's not okay, it's not. It is." Marcus reached out and took Elijah's hand, the same way he had on that first night in the diner, when everything was uncertain and they were both just trying to survive. "I've had a good life. Better than I ever expected, and a lot of that is because of you. Don't talk like that. Don't talk like you're already gone. I'm not gone yet, and I plan to make the most of whatever time I have left. But I need you to make me a promise." Elijah wiped his eyes, struggling to hold himself together. "Anything. Don't fall apart. Not now. I need you to be strong, not for me, but for Maya and the kids, for your mum, for everyone who's going to be hurting when I'm gone. I need to know that you'll be okay, that you'll keep going." "Dad, promise me." Elijah closed his eyes, took a shaky breath. "I promise." The months that followed were difficult, but precious. Marcus moved in with Elijah and Maya, spending his remaining time surrounded by family. There were good days and bad days, pain and peace, laughter and tears. The grandchildren brought him drawings and stories and endless questions about his life, and he answered every one, wanting them to remember him as more than just the sick man in the bed. One evening near the end, Elijah sat with him alone. The house was quiet, everyone else asleep. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting silver patterns on the walls. "Are you scared?" Elijah asked softly. Marcus considered the question. "No," he said finally. "I used to be scared of a lot of things. Dying alone, being forgotten, not mattering. But I'm not scared anymore." "Why not?" "Because I know that I mattered. To you, to Maya, to those kids, to every person I helped through the non-profit, every veteran I talked down from the ledge." He smiled, his eyes bright despite the weakness in his body. "That night in the alley, when you asked if you could come home with me, that was the beginning of everything. Everything good that happened afterwards started there." Elijah's tears were falling freely now. "I love you, Dad, so much." "I love you too, son, more than words can say." Marcus reached out, his hand trembling, and brushed the tears from Elijah's cheek. "You're going to be okay. You're going to do amazing things, and I'm going to be so proud of you wherever I end up." "You really believe that? That there's something after?" "I don't know. Nobody knows. But I believe in you. That's enough for me." They sat together in the moonlight, holding hands, saying without words all the things that needed to be said, and when Marcus finally closed his eyes, it was with a smile on his face and peace in his heart. He had lived a good life. He had loved and been loved. He had made a difference. What more could any person ask for? The funeral was held on a clear day in late spring, the kind of day Marcus had always loved. The chapel was packed, Veterans in uniform, colleagues from the non-profit, families he had helped over the years, friends and neighbors and people whose lives he had touched in ways big and small. Elijah delivered the eulogy, his voice steady, despite the tears he couldn't quite hold back. "My father wasn't perfect," he said. "He had his struggles, his demons, his dark days. But he never let those things define him. Instead, he took the pain he'd experienced and used it to help others. He saw a scared kid in an alley and chose compassion over indifference. He chose love over fear. And in doing so, he changed my life, and I believe changed the world, one person at a time." He paused, looking out at the assembled mourners. "I asked him once, near the end, what he wanted to be remembered for. He said, 'Tell them I tried. Tell them I didn't always get it right, but I tried. And tell them that trying is enough.' So that's what I'm telling you today. Marcus Cole tried. He tried to be a good soldier, a good friend, a good father, a good man, and he succeeded in every way that matters." The burial was private, just family at the graveside. They laid Marcus to rest next to his parents, in a small cemetery outside the city where the trees were green and the birds sang in the branches. Elijah placed a hand on the freshly turned earth and whispered something too quiet for anyone else to hear. Then they went home, all of them, to grieve and to heal and to begin the long process of learning to live without him. It took time, as these things always do. There were nights when Elijah woke up reaching for his phone, wanting to call his father, before remembering that the number wouldn't ring anymore. There were moments when he saw something. A sunset, a baseball game, one of the kids doing something funny, and felt the sharp stab of knowing he couldn't share it with Marcus. But there was also joy. The grandchildren grew, each one carrying pieces of their grandfather in their smiles and their stubborn independence. Elijah's work flourished, helping more and more veterans find their way back from the brink. Maya was his rock, as she had always been, holding the family together with her quiet strength. And Denise, against all odds, became a grandmother worthy of the title. She babysat and baked and told stories about Elijah's childhood, filling in gaps that Marcus couldn't. She and Elijah finally found the relationship they'd both been searching for, not the one they'd lost, but something new, built on the ashes of the old. "He would have liked this," Elijah said one evening, watching his mother read a bedtime story to little Sandra, "seeing us all together, being a real family." Maya squeezed his hand. "He did see it. He saw enough." "I hope so." On the first anniversary of Marcus's death, Elijah took his children to the alley where it had all begun. It was different now. The dumpster was gone, replaced by a small parking lot. But the brick walls were the same, and the bus stop across the street still stood, battered but functional. "This is where Grandpa found me," he told them, crouching down to their level. "I was cold and scared, and I didn't think anyone cared about me. But he stopped. He talked to me. He asked if I wanted to come home with him, and when I said yes, he kept that promise. He kept it for the rest of his life." "Were you happy, Daddy?" Michael asked, "after Grandpa found you?" Elijah thought about it, really thought about it. The hard times and the good times, the struggles and the triumphs, the love that had sustained him through everything. "Yeah, buddy," he said finally. "I was happy, the happiest I've ever been." "I wish I could have known Grandpa longer," Sandra said softly. "Me too, sweetheart, me too. But you know what? He's still with us. Every time we do something kind for someone who needs help, every time we choose love over fear, every time we keep a promise, that's Grandpa. That's his legacy, living on through us." They stood there for a moment, the four of them, in the place where two broken people had found each other and made something whole. Then Elijah took his children's hands and led them home, carrying the memory of his father with him like a light in the darkness. The story didn't end with Marcus's death. Stories never really end. They just changed shape, passing from one generation to the next, evolving with each telling. Years later, Michael Cole would become a social worker, specializing in foster care placement, helping children find families the way his grandfather had done for his father. Little Sandra would become a teacher, inspiring young minds and always making time for the students who seemed lost or afraid. And Elijah continued his work, honoring Marcus's memory by helping others heal. He established a foundation in his father's name, funding programs for veteran mental health and youth homelessness. He gave speeches and wrote articles and trained the next generation of psychiatrists to see their patients as people first, diagnoses second. "Well, what's the most important thing you've learned?" a reporter asked him once, toward the end of his own career. Elijah thought about it for a long moment, about the alley and the rain, about the diner and the hot chocolate, about all the years that had followed, the joy and the pain and the love that had made it all worthwhile. "That everyone deserves a chance," he said finally. "That one act of kindness can change everything. And that home isn't a place, it's a person. If you're lucky, it's the person who stops when everyone else walks by. The one who asks, 'Are you okay?' The one who answers yes when a scared kid asks if they can come home with them." He paused, smiling at a memory. "My father taught me that, and I've spent my whole life trying to pass it on." The interview ended, but the story continued, in the lives Elijah touched, in the families the foundation helped create, in the ripples that spread outward from one small act of compassion on a rainy November night. That's how change happens. Not with grand gestures or world-shaking events, but with ordinary people making the choice to care, one person at a time, one moment at a time, forever and ever, without end. In the end, that was Marcus Cole's greatest gift. Not just to Elijah, but to everyone his son would go on to help. The gift of proof that kindness matters, that love is worth the risk, that we are all capable of being someone's home. All we have to do is stop and ask and answer yes.